We're all living through a fundamental transformation in the way we work. Automation and artificial intelligence are replacing human tasks. Organizations are looking for new skills. The relationship between employer and employee is shifting. It's a high-stakes game of digital disruption. It's not just about the best technology. It's about how organizations use, manage, and inspire their people in a digital world. Cognitive computing is replacing knowledge work, but it's still people who have ideas and bring wisdom and leadership, not machines. Vast numbers of jobs will vanish in their current form. Current skills will become obsolete. New and different skills will be needed. New jobs will emerge. What are the new skills that organizations and society need for the future? It's not just about STEM. Today's skills background is for innovation and creativity, adaptability, problem solving, and leadership. So how are you attracting the talent you need for the digital age? Your future is now.
So good morning and welcome to our webinar, Preparing for Tomorrow's Workforce Today. It's really great to see so many of you joining.
The future of work is really a hot topic for our clients, and it's great that we have the opportunity to share our views with you and to talk with you about that.
There are some really big questions out there at the moment. Organizations wondering, are they ready for this change, and what will actually really change, and how will the nature of jobs change?
Yes, and we see a lot of hope, but also a lot of anxiety when it comes to the future of work. Therefore, a big question is also, how do we actually manage that transition?
So, good morning. My name is Sarah Kay. I'm the one on the left on the slides, and I'm a partner in our people and organisation practice based here in Switzerland. And just for those of you maybe new to this webinar format, hopefully you can see on the window in front of you, you can see the slide that has a picture of myself and Charles. And then on the right-hand side, there's a question and answers tab as well. So please, we've got about half an hour together, but if you do have questions, we've typed them in there and we will try and get to them as we go through the next 30 minutes.
Cool. And also good morning from my side. My name is Charles Dunkor. I'm also a partner within the PwC People and Organization practice based here in Zurich, Switzerland.
So with myself and Charles and our team, we're really working with organisations at the moment, both Swiss and global, to help them understand what that impact of technology and digital and the business is really going to be. So we were really interested and I suppose anxiously awaiting for the results of this global study, Preparing for Tomorrow's Workforce Today, to see really whether the research and that global base of research was really reflecting the reality that we were seeing and experiencing and hearing on the ground with the client organisations we work with.
Exactly. But why don't we just start telling a bit about the study itself? PwC has conducted the study Preparing for Tomorrow's Workforce Today together with Linda Gretton and her team at the London Business School. In 2018, we have interviewed more than 1,200 executives in 10 industries and close to 80 countries. So this is really a global undertaking. Close to 60% of respondents were HR professionals and 41% were business executives. of which 13% were C-suite level leaders.
So I think it's really brilliant for us to get that unique insight into what's on people's minds, and I think having that balance between HR people getting their view of the world and what the business thinks, and that actually came out in the end with some interesting results that we'll talk about in a second. But let's get into the survey itself now. We'll leave you. We're not going to go through all 50 pages of it, but we really wanted to spend the short amount of time we had today really focusing on the actions. So what were those 6 priorities that were really call out, no regret actions that organizations could take that would come out of the research?
Exactly, and here they are, 6 key areas that we're going to quickly walk through now.
Okay, so let's start with the first. So the headline talks to us about people experience around engaging your workforce. But Charles, what do you think? What's needed for companies to really start developing a differentiated people experience in the future, and what do you see already now that some of those forward-thinking companies are doing?
Okay. We already know that a good people experience can enhance the customer experience. It also helps companies keep and attract talent. In this regard, people experience is as much about workloads, working conditions, etc. I think first, it is important to differentiate a people experience and employee experience. Whilst the employee experience implies that you are concerned only with your own employees, the latter suggests that an organization has to focus on the engagement of all people in the whole ecosystem. This makes absolutely sense. We are moving rapidly towards a more platform-based economy. Products and services are produced and delivered not only by our own employees, but through the value chain of the whole ecosystem. Thus, you must be concerned about the engagement of all the key players in that system. We also see that companies are rediscovering that their employees are not only human factors, but human beings. Thus, they acknowledge that individuals are not merely exchanging labor with salary in the workplace, but that work is a key part of one's identity. Successful companies therefore stress more and more the social function they play in bringing people together and ensuring well-being in the broader sense for their employees.
So could you give an example of that?
Yeah, sure. A particular company comes to my mind that is not only offering physical and mental well-being programs to employees, but also weekly opportunities that involve families and friends of their employees. They happen within, but also outside of the company. The purpose is to strengthen the bond between employees and, in the broader sense, make them happy and less lonely.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You talk about this ecosystem and this ecosystem changing. That classic mode of sort of employer and employee really breaking down and people having to think about it differently. The one thing on the slide that always catches my eye in this connected world is that 50% of people are now responding that they don't believe that workloads are manageable, and I think that really plays into this topic of the challenge of the future of the work. Our tools and our phones give us so much accessibility to information and connectivity, but it's really creating quite some stress in the system.
You're absolutely right, and I think in future we will see even more of that stress coming to the workforce, workplace with automation and other technology that employees have to cope with. And I think that the role of the business is not only to help employees with kind of the well-being outside of their actual work, but really ensuring that whilst they're working, they reduce the stress and really can bring their full potential to the work at hand.
Yeah.
This leads us right into the topic of workforce analytics. So, Sarah, is the people's business really a numbers business today?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think when I started my life back in HR around 25 years ago. I'm not sure we really use much data. A bit of basic reporting was as much as we did, but the research that we've done now really suggests that both business and HR professionals are really starting to understand and recognise the importance of analytics, and really understanding that it can give a critical edge, a differentiator, which is obviously really important in today's exceptionally competitive landscape. And I think there are a few really important things that came out of the survey. So whilst organisations know that data and analytics is really important to their business, they're actually simultaneously really struggling to maximise its use around all kinds of dimensions, from talent, etc.
And Sarah, why is that?
Well, honestly, I think there's a few reasons. I think it's a relatively new capability for organisations. There's been a lot of sort of rebranding of reporting functions to analytics functions, but actually it's still basic reporting. And I think organisations are just struggling with handling and managing the quality of their global data. And I think some of the systems changes that we've seen have helped that. But I really would encourage organisations to really think about investing in digital tools, understanding your data. I think it's a total no-regrets move, because I think there's so much you can do today to really apply analytical rigor to decision-making, to really think about how you personalise that employee experience that you were talking about earlier. So how do you get to kind of the stuff that what your employees really want? And how can you help the organisation, even from a diversity perspective? Do you bias your people processes by understanding how if I take a recruitment cycle, how is your recruitment cycle filtering out, diversity in a way that you might be able to change it and change the process? So when I think about my own experience, I think one of the most important areas to leverage in analytics is really that thinking about skills and capabilities of the future. It's going to be critically important for organisations to be able to predict skills gaps in the future. So how many people work for you? How do you know what skills you're going to need in the future? And if people are interested, myself and one of our colleagues here, Linda, we're running a separate webinar series on that topic of people analytics. And we start really, the first one in the series starts with strategic workforce planning. So a really important topic for organisations. But let's go to the HR function in a bit more depth. So I think one of the interesting insights, and we alluded to this earlier, is the difference in business reporting their readiness and the HR function reporting the readiness. And the business seems to have less confidence than the HR function does. I wonder if this somehow links back to the data.
Yes, and this is really an interesting one, and we've seen that already for many years, that there is obviously a different perception from HR professionals about themselves, and also how business professionals view HR. And it really seems that HR leaders feel more comfortable with their own efforts to prepare the workforce of the future than their bosses are.
But what's the problem, Charles? Is HR being too confident, or are the business leaders being too pessimistic?
Well, Sarah, I think it's probably a little of both. But HR professionals will need to work to bridge the gap and keep communicating and working with the business to find answers to the whole organization of the future. I give you a concrete and I think a pertinent example. Talking about, and you've mentioned that just a second ago, about the future, everyone is concerned about what future jobs will we have and what capabilities and skills are needed in future to be successful. This is obviously a core HR question. However, we still don't see HR leaders really stepping up to answer that question. They rely on business to tell them what they need in future. The business, on the other side, they're not really expecting HR to answer the question itself, but to lead the dialogue that at the end will produce a hypothesis what kind of employees we need in future.
So I suppose like we're talking essentially that balance, right? You know, trying to get HR and business to have a kind of mutual dialogue that's neither led by either one, but kind of working together. Do you have another example of maybe where an organization's getting this right?
Yeah, sure. It's a whole discussion about new operating or business models. Companies, as you know, are experimenting with novel operating models, like, you know, platform models that we see mushrooming everywhere. Operating models are also modifying, or companies are modifying existing operating models faster and faster. All this has huge impact on people working in those models. But here again, we mostly see HR sitting in the back seat as opposed to co-driving. They don't need to be, you know, in the driver's seat, but at least co-driving that conversation. And we think that really needs to change. And for that, HR needs to reassess what capabilities they need themselves within the HR function, but also how HR needs to be set up to fully support the future business needs.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's because of the speed of change that those existing processes are really being put under stress. I think you can sort of get away with sort of annual workforce planning or the occasional sort of thought around all design or operating models. But today, when the pressure is really on organizations, there really needs to be much more focus on innovation and dialogue.
Absolutely. And I think also HR, it has to do with that, and also in addition, it has to do with their own perception of what role HR wants to play in future. And I think the business really opens the door for HR and says, you know, we ask you to step up because we need your know-how and we need your support. But now HR needs to enter the room and really play the role that is assigned to them.
Yeah. So let's have another look where the scorecard wasn't painting too rosy a picture, so the area of HR technology. Charles, why do you think we found such a sober assessment, and what does HR need to do to step up around the space of HR technology?
In our report, we find that 4 out of 5 at-risk capabilities relate to the use of HR and technology to improve the people experience. Over 60% of respondents in our report see HR's ability to understand emerging technology landscape as important. But the same number, so again, 60% do not think that their HR function actually has the capability today to really understand and harness the potential of technology. Which brings us directly to the next topic, flexible talent. Sarah, what is flexible talent and why it is important for us?
Yeah, and maybe I just sort of a comment on the technology. So we just did a piece of work for an organisation where we were just asked to look at just their talent acquisition process and look at the landscape of digital tools that could be leveraged at all steps in the talent acquisition process. And we found over 200 tools out there. And I think that's consistently when I'm talking to organizations, I feel like, you know, particularly HR leaders and people with technology responsibility are just being bombarded by vendors with new gadgets, new widgets, new things, new clever digital tools, which by themselves individually can make a difference, but how do you kind of sort out when there's kind of a landscape of many, many hundreds of these?
Sure. And that brings me actually to a point that we've also realized working together on clients, that HR, when it comes to HR technology, focus at the moment too much only on cloud solutions. And yes, they are important because they build the base, but more and more they need to be involved in the discussion of, you know, robotization, of chatbots, of what blockchain will have an impact in HR. And we don't hear this discussion within HR, within the HR community.
I suppose I do a bit, but I suppose that, I mean, it's the biggest disappointment, isn't it? Once you've completed your kind of core cloud implementation, that recognition that actually there's still, 20, 30, 40% of your process scope that can be outside of their core. But I think that's really where digital tools and automation can really help to kind of tie up those loose ends of really thinking about your end-to-end processes and your end-to-end delivery. And I think that really creates some exciting possibility. And the amazing thing that the cloud does is really serve as a vehicle for kind of global, consistent data. And I think that's, when we think back to what we were talking about around analytics, that's a really important topic for organisations today. But let's get into this topic at hand. So flexible talent, I suppose this is one of the areas that I'm kind of passionate about, because I think organisations are becoming much more fluid. And I see this both as a sort of opportunity and a threat. And, we're seeing this move away of work from jobs. So let me just explain what I mean by that. So there are a number of studies that really point to the scale of this. In the US, it's estimated that freelancers will become the majority of the US workforce in the next decade. But so when you talk about those platforms that we were talking about earlier, so, they can be from sort of relatively low skilled, so drivers on Uber, or people with assets that they want to sweat better, so like couch surfing or Airbnb hosts. But actually we're seeing a move for these platforms. So a platform like Kaggle, who, I'm not sure if many of you heard it. So Kaggle is my favorite platform. It's like for Uber nerds. It's for your deep technical data scientists. And actually, organisations are able to present real-world problems, so they want to be able to create an algorithm or a piece of data analysis to do something, and they set it up in Kaggle as a competition to get the work done. So the prizes can be anywhere, over $100,000 for some of the prizes, and teams work on these assignments. And I think what's really interesting, the people that are working these assignments, they are doing work for that organisation, but they don't have a job. And so I think this move really challenges us to think about kind of that separation of kind of jobs from organisations, which we've seen a lot of, so outsourcing, contractor models, etc. But now I think importantly this move away of work from jobs creates another dynamic, which I think can be really helpful. I suppose the positive side of me goes, this can be really incredibly helpful in terms of creating kind of a way for people to work flexibly, to work agile, to choose to work when they want to in a way that kind of traditional jobs never have. But then there's a piece of me that kind of questions issues such as, how do we look after people in those contexts? If you're performing on Kaggle and getting your source of income from that, there ain't no sick pay there. There's no social protection around those individuals. And I think we have to manage this dynamic. And I think the moves that we're seeing in the US, I think they are more easy to deliver than in the European market, where we have more complex legislation. But I feel a little frustrated at the moment that we're not seeing as strong as a governmental response as we need to really modernise some of the ways that we think about employment and some of the ways we think about how that happens in the future.
And how does that really look like in organizations?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Charles, and it goes back a little bit to what you were talking about. It's no longer employee experience, it's people experience, that whole ecosystem. And I think there are many areas that need to change in organizations, even just starting with your systems that allow you to leverage that gig economy in a different way. And it becomes much harder for organizations to even think about how you might open source ideas or use open innovation platforms when actually your overall ecosystem and technology doesn't allow you to do that. And I think most importantly, it's really clear that organizations need to do more to take advantage of this opportunity and move away from relying on traditional employee base, because I think it does support the organizational flexibility that's needed. But I think at the same time, we really need to have in the back of our mind how we're providing fair opportunity and building trust with our whole workforce, however it is that we're sourced, and how are we thinking about that employment relations, and how our culture is delivered to our customers as well.
Exactly, and I think that's a really important point that you've just mentioned, the culture aspect, because the fewer employees or full-time employees that you have in an organization, and the more fluid your workforce is, the more important it is that you really have a strong culture that really differentiates yourself from other organizations. Because why, if I'm a gig worker, shall I work for company X and not Y if the culture is no different? So I think in future we will see a much more and stronger emphasis on the culture, what is really the culture, and using culture as a differentiator towards other organizations. Which brings us to the last of those 6 calls to action, that we need to have a clear narrative.
Absolutely. This is the get your story straight category, isn't it, right?
Absolutely. Organization can protect jobs that are made redundant by technology, but they do have a responsibility to their people to prepare them for the future at hand.
And honestly, I can't think of a more important time for business leaders and HR leaders to work together to produce that strong people-centered narrative about how jobs in their organization will change. We're seeing the stress in the system. We're seeing anxiety. We're seeing overload. And I think having that clear vision of how technology will change the way that people will work, and having some strategies that will equip them and prepare them is really important and really required. And even I think, I was chatting to a leadership team the other day, and I think sometimes even if you don't know the exact details of what's going to be changing, I think just to be transparent and to have a clear story that we're working on it, we'll work with you to find out the story, is part of that, creating that narrative as well, because I think organizations and employees in organizations are really looking for that.
And I also think experimenting is more and more important, because as you're saying, we don't know how the future will evolve, but what we can do is to experiment, to try out things, to explore a bit what facets the future could have, and some of those elements will be successful, and some of them will be not successful, but by trying out, we will see a clearer and clearer view in which direction we need to be heading. So I suppose we're encouraging organizations to really experiment and try things out, and not to say, we need to have first a concept and a theory before we start exploring it.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think the kind of days of the large multi-year programmatic change are really behind us, and I think that's only a very good thing for organisations, because I think that notion of kind of unsticking, changing, and resticking the organisation is really gone. It's about how do we create that agility and that flexibility, that we're just in a world of permanent change right now.
Absolutely. So that's it for our rapid gallop through our 2018 study.
So please feel free to dive into more detail if any of the things that we were talking about this morning interested you. We will share the link again for the full version of the study via email for all of you who've attended this morning. And we're also really excited. We're waiting for the Swiss version, so we should get some results so we can share those with you as well, in terms of if this is the global view, what's that story and how is that playing out in Switzerland? So stay posted for that.
So thank you for all joining us, and we are really looking forward to continue this dialogue. And I really want to stress the dialogue. It's not that we have all the right answers. It's basically we're exploring the future together with you. So we're really looking forward to continue the conversation with you shortly. Thank you very much.
And look at that, Charles, 8:29 we are. That's unheard of for you and I.
Swiss timing.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.